Welcome to the Surviving Siblings podcast. I'm your host, Maya Roffler. As a surviving sibling myself, I knew that I wanted to share my story, my brother's story. I lost my brother to a homicide in November 2016, and after going through this experience, I knew that I wanted to share my story and his story. And now it's your turn to share your stories. Today I have another incredible surviving sibling with us. I have Dan Dunsmore. Dan, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Maya. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you and your listeners.
It's my absolute pleasure. I am looking forward to hearing your story and your journey. You've lost more than one sibling that you're going to share with us today, but before we get into losing these incredible siblings that you love and cherish so much still, Dan, take us back in time. Take us back and share a little bit about your family dynamics. Tell us a little bit about that.
I'll take you back to 1968.
Let's do it.
Which is, a long time ago. And my family, we were living in South Knoxville, Tennessee. I always say South Knoxville because it's different from the rest of Knoxville, and I take great pride in South Knoxville. It was an idyllic childhood for me. We were a family of 7 at that point in 1968. My baby sister Cindy had just been born, and my older brother and sister are 10 and 7 years older than I am. So there was that sort of a small cluster of a family. And then I came along, and then my sister Patti came along 2 years later. So we were another little cluster of a family. And then my baby sister Cindy was born. So that sort of describes my family living in South Knoxville. We lived in a neighborhood that was just the best neighborhood, Maya. We felt safe. We played in the Tennessee River. We biked up and down the streets and back alleys of our neighborhood, fox and hounds at night in the summertime. And Patti and I had our own sets of friends, but we also have mutual friends. And oftentimes the two sets of friends, we get together and play together. And that sort of describes my family, I think, in a nutshell. It was, like I said, it was an idyllic childhood, really, in a lot of ways. And everything was great as of 1968. That started to change in 1970 when my sister Patti became ill during the wintertime.
Yeah, and thank you for sharing about your southern, and I know South Knoxville is different. I don't know if I'm in Atlanta, Dan, so I definitely know southern vibes here, okay? I love that. I know.
Very good. Very good.
But a southern childhood is a special one and that's a really beautiful area. And I definitely get like the visual image and like feeling of what you guys were doing. And that's amazing. And I appreciate you sharing with us too, that like you and Patti were like, I get being from a bigger family. I'm one of 4, which nowadays they're like, wow, that's a big family. But like back in the day, a big family was 5, 6, 7 kids, and which is more your vibe and where you guys are from. You were a big family. And so in those family dynamics, you're paired up with like different, and for me, it was me and my brother. Even though I have a sister who's closer in age to me, it was me and my brother because we were like the wild ones. Like we were outside all the time. We were playing. We had that kind of youth that I think sometimes doesn't happen these days, but that's a whole other podcast episode.
Yeah.
So yeah, you and Patti were like one of the groups in the family dynamic. So I understand the connection there. But you had just mentioned too, yeah, things changed and things happened with Patti. So take us there. Tell us what was going on with Patti.
She had a cold, or at least that's what we thought. Even at that many years ago, I can remember my family being concerned that she had a cold, and it seemed to develop into a flu and maybe into a stomach bug. And she just wasn't getting over it. And I thought, because this is how Patti and I were, we were competitive. We loved each other, but we were 2 years apart, and she was every bit as outgoing and athletic and all those other things as I was. And so there was some competition there. And I just couldn't figure out why she was going to such great lengths for my parents' attention. And it got to the point where, especially my dad, thought we maybe need to put her in the hospital. She's just not getting over this thing. And so they hospitalized her. And I remember that she was in the hospital for a pretty short period of time. This is one of the things I want to mention to your listeners, is that I have had a lot of difficulty over the years with time frames, because of all the deaths that occurred in my family. It must be part of the trauma that I was going through. But anyway, I since learned that Patti was in the hospital for 10 days. I went to see her on, I guess, about the eighth or ninth night or so, maybe the night before she passed away. And one of the feelings of guilt I've had to deal with all my life, Maya, is that the last thing I said to Patti, the last words I spoke to her were, I can't believe you're doing this just to get my parents' attention, and walked out of the hospital room. I will forever wish I had said, I love you, or I hope you feel better, or something other than what I said. But those were the last words I ever spoke to Patti. Sometime that night or the next morning, the physicians finally figured out that her appendix had burst. And
So the day after you were there.
that's how I remember it.
Right.
It could have been 2 or 3 days afterwards, honestly,
How
but it
old were
seemed
you,
like
Dan?
I
How
was
old were
thir
you?
I had just turned 13.
That's a very interesting age too. That's why I wanted to make sure we dialed into that because
Right.
at that age, like the preteen, teen age, we do have a decent memory. As we grow older, we remember things a little differently. But I get what you're saying. So around that time, she had been so sick and she had been in the hospital, and
They find out she has her appendix has burst, and so that morning, they rush her to the operating room, and she died on the operating table. And I'm sorry, I'll get emotional. It's
hey,
been 55 years, and I still get emotional, but so that's how she passed away, and the last time I had seen her was that night before, 2 nights before, when I hope it was jokingly, but and I'm sure she wouldn't have expected anything other than that for me to say something snarky, "You're just doing this to get our parents' attention," thing, but that I will always regret that those are my last words to her.
of course, of
Sure.
course.
Yeah.
But I think, and we'll talk about this more as we continue down in your story, but I this is such a great testament to the sibling relationship, right? Because like we say things like this to our siblings because only we can say them. Had anyone else said that to your sibling, you probably would have been like, I'm going to fight you. There's no way. But
Sure.
we can say that. But I think it's also a beauty and a testament to how much you love your sister that you feel guilty about saying that. And we'll talk about how you worked through that through these years. But
Sure.
I'm curious though. So you were there and she gets rushed in. And it's also a highlight on the time too, because fortunately, appendicitis now, right, all these 50 years later, we identify it quickly. Not as many people die from it, thank goodness. But back
Right.
then, it wasn't identified as quickly. So tell us a little bit more about what that time looked like. So were your parents called into the hospital? Like, how did you find out this is what happened? What was happening to you as a 13-year-old?
So the day that the phone call came into our house, which I think was the next day or the day after, that's a blur to me, honestly. I can remember little things here and there, but I remember the phone call coming in. My mother and my older sister were home. My older brother had already recently moved out of the house and was living somewhere else in Knoxville because he was that much older than I was. But the call came in, and I remember my mother just immediately starting to sob, and then she said something to my sister Libby. They both began to sob. Maya, I don't remember that they ever said anything to me at that moment. They may have said the whole thing to me, but I have no memory of them saying anything to me. And the next memory I have is being in that house by myself. So my mother and my older sister Libby, and then my baby sister Cindy left the house at some point, not too long after that phone call came in. Now, maybe they went to the hospital, maybe they went to a neighbor, I don't know, and maybe they weren't gone that long, but it felt like they were gone forever to me. And I was suddenly in this empty house, very quiet, by myself, 13 years old, not knowing for sure what had happened. I just know that something made my mother and my sister very upset. I'm not even necessarily thinking that it has anything to do with Patti, but I just remember being in that house by myself. And then everybody came back to the house. And that's when I found out that Patti had passed away. And
Who
but
told you, Dan? Do you remember who told you?
I can't
Because it
remember
can be a
exactly to me,
blur.
but I remember my mom and my dad and my sister and my older brother even, they all were suddenly back in that house. My baby sister Cindy, we were all there in that house together again. And I'm sure it was my mother and my father who were trying to explain to me what had just happened to my sister. And it wasn't expected at all. She just had a cold.
Right.
I still needed to give her a hard time when I saw her again, right? And so I was in shock. I just went into shock. But that empty house feeling is something that stayed with me all my life. I really have a hard time. I can be alone. I am alone a lot in houses, but I have to have the radio on or the TV playing, or I have to be doing something. I really have a difficult time just sitting in an empty house by myself. And I know it goes back because I've had therapy. I know it goes back to that, however long a period of time it was, being in that house alone when I wasn't sure what had happened to my family. But they did try their best once they all returned to the house to comfort me, and maybe they realized what they had done by leaving me alone. I don't know, but suddenly that empty house became the full house again, minus Patti, who would never return to the house.
If you've lost a sibling, trust me, I know exactly how you feel. I'm Maya. I'm the host of the Surviving Siblings podcast, but I'm also the founder of Surviving Siblings Support. I know that going through this experience is extremely difficult, whether you've lost a brother like me, a sister, or perhaps more than one sibling. Trust me, we know exactly how you feel. So that's why I started our Patreon account. You can click below to find out more about our Patreon. If you join our Patreon group, it'll give you just a little bit of extra support that you need along your journey as a bereaved sibling, or as we like to call it, a surviving sibling. We offer monthly support groups. We offer a free copy of our grief guide that is actually found on Amazon. It's called The Grief Guide for Surviving Siblings. We also offer direct messaging to our community and to me for extra support. And we have incredible events. We have workshops throughout the year that you'll get access to, and you'll also have access to our summit that happens annually. And so much more as you'll connect with a community of surviving siblings that understand the journey of losing a sibling. You can click below to join us today and also check out some additional VIP features that we offer. I hope to see you in the group, and until then, keep on surviving, my surviving siblings.
And we're going to talk a little more about your therapy journey later in this episode, but I think it's so insightful that you're sharing that was a moment that, because I think we need to understand, especially when we've lost because we talk about sibling loss here, when we lost a sibling at a young age, which you were young, right? I think everybody thinks young is different. For me, 13 is young, and there's different things that shape us in different ways, but you're a very impressionable young person at 13. That's very impressionable. And so this feeling of being alone, we could do a whole other episode on this, Dan, because I connect with that too. I have to have the TV on or some noise happening too. And there's other reasons for that in my own life, but I that's very insightful and I connect with that. And that's big. So walk us through what happened. So after you found out and after the family's all back and you've got that motion back in the house again, what happened next? Did you guys have a funeral for your sister, or what happened? How was that for you? Again, at such an impressionable age at 13, that's a
Yeah.
lot.
So again, a lot of it's a blur, but what I do remember is my father, especially, started saying, I thought it might be an appendicitis. I wish I had questioned the doctors, and he didn't. And I don't know that he ever got over that feeling of guilt that he had. I think it broke his heart irreparably because he would sob. And my dad wasn't a crier, but he would sob when he would say, I just wish I had mentioned the possibility of an appendicitis to the doctors at some point. The funeral, what I remember about the funeral, Maya, was that it was open casket. And talk about another Southern thing.
Yes.
I'm sure it brings closure and comfort to some people, but I personally don't like the open casket.
It's not my thing either, Dan. Yeah.
There was
Mhm.
Patti asleep, but I knew she was dead. And they had dressed her up. And I wanted to remember her in a different way than what I was seeing in that casket. And I really wished I hadn't had to see that. And I've been to other open casket funerals since then. And every time I go, I just don't need to see that. I don't need to walk up to that casket one more time and see that person And so I tend to avoid the casket at open casket funerals. Yeah. So that's kind of what happened in the aftermath. I remember people coming to her funeral, especially a teacher I had a couple of years earlier, who it's probably why I went, one of the reasons I went into education myself. This teacher came to Patti's funeral 2 years after I'd been in her class. That teachers make such a difference in people's lives. And so I have that memory as well. But so that's what I remember in the aftermath. About a week or so after Patti passed away, I slept on the second floor of our house, and I must have been wondering if she was okay, because she did come to me in a dream one night, and it wasn't freaky, it wasn't scary, it wasn't weird. It was very comforting. She walked up to me in this dream. It was just her in the dream, and I don't know where I was, but she walked up to me, and she was actually wearing this frilly dress they'd put on her, and she was wearing what she was wearing in the casket.
Wow.
And the other thing I remember about her was that her hair was a little bit longer than it usually was. She tended to keep her hair short, or my mother kept it short or whatever. So she didn't have a long hairdo. But in this dream, her hair was a little bit longer. And all she said to me was, "I'm okay." And she said it twice. She said it twice to me. She said, "I'm okay. I'm okay." And then she just turned and walked away. And that's always been such a source of comfort to me, that she would let me know she was okay. Because I think I needed to know that. I needed to know that she was okay.
Yeah, because you were mentioning this was pretty fresh after, like, pretty recent after the loss, and she visited you. And I got to ask you this. Do you think maybe her hair being a little longer was symbolic of time passing?
I haven't thought of that until you just asked that question, but
It just
maybe
hit me
so.
for some reason. I was
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
I
I'd
felt
never,
compelled to ask you that.
maybe, but does your hair grow that fast in just a week or two? But yeah, but it definitely was longer. But yeah, maybe that is what. And she was also barefooted.
Interesting.
And so I wonder if when you're in a casket, or do they put shoes on you? I don't know. I don't know why. That's the other question I've always asked, is why was she barefooted in this dream? I understood why I was seeing the dress that she was wearing, but why was the hair a little bit longer, and why was she barefooted? But it was such a comforting dream for me. It still to this day brings me comfort to know that even in death, she cared that much about me to let me know she was okay.
Yeah.
And so
And she told you that more than once.
she
Yeah.
said it twice, and then she just turned. And yeah, that was a big moment for me. And as she's been maybe in a handful of my dreams since then over
Yeah.
the years, never as the main character again, if you will. And so it was just, I felt like she had done what she needed to do. She had let me know she was okay, and she didn't need to be in my dreams anymore after that. She's appeared every now and then, but not really that often since that night.
Did you feel like, even at a young age, did you feel like that was a big, it was so quick after her passing, which a lot of people, a lot of you guys listening to this are going to be super jealous of Dan, because I can't tell you how many people on our social platforms are like, when is my sibling going to visit me in a dream? So they're going to be jealous of you, Dan, in this one. They're
Oh,
going to be jealous. But did you feel like that was a healing moment, even early in the grieving journey for you?
it absolutely was a healing moment, and it has
Yeah.
continued to be a healing moment for me.
You're emotional just talking about it all these many years later, so this was huge for you.
It was so significant, and it's one of the stories I tell about her, that she cared that much to see me in the dream, and but hasn't continued to come back. Like I said, she's been in probably a handful of dreams over the last 55 years since then, but never as like a main character. I felt like she realized I needed that moment, and I was struggling, Maya. I'm not a particularly religious person. I'm
Mhm.
spiritual. I'd like to think I'm spiritual, but I was so desperate for some sort of comfort. My mother and father were grieving, and I'm sure they were doing their best to comfort me, but they were going through their own stuff.
Mhm.
And my older brother was out of the house by then. My older sister was doing her high school teenage thing. And then I had my baby sister, Cindy. So I did feel very much alone during that time
Well,
period.
'cause that was your person.
That was my person. Yeah, that was my cluster of that family, if you
Mhm.
will. Yes, exactly. And so I slept with a Bible for about 2 or 3 weeks. Now, doesn't make that's just interesting on its own, but then for me, because I'm not particularly religious, why did I think that sleeping with that Bible might bring me some comfort? But it did. It did, Maya. I needed something to hold on to, And so that sleeping with that Bible helped, and the memory of Patty's visit in the dream helped me as well get through those first few weeks, or months.
So tell us a little bit. That's interesting, and I think it is interesting too because I think even if you're not like super religious or super spiritual or like wherever you fall, I think we all question whatever our belief was before going through, even if you were right religious. Because I know a lot of people in our community and people who have shared on the show, like some of them were really religious or really spiritual, and then going through this type of loss, you question everything. So it's not the craziest thing in the world for me to hear that you had a Bible. Like you needed something, you needed faith, you needed to believe something. That's what I get out of your
Yes.
story.
Yeah.
Dan, tell us a little bit about how this shaped you and what you mentioned already, how your parents, because obviously they were grieving. Share with us the next few years of your life because now, you're middle school, high school, like this is like shaping your life. How did this change your family dynamic and how did this change you? Walk us through some of that because this is such a massive loss to go through at 13.
I've heard other people who have lost siblings and guests on your show have mentioned too that you maybe subconsciously, at least I did at first subconsciously, I knew I was living my life for two people at that point. And then it became a conscious thing later on in my life that I knew that when I was going to have some sort of success in my life, or if I was going to go do something fun, that Patti was coming with me. So I was always doing everything for myself and for her, and hoping she was proud of me. And so that was one thing. And that started happening really early on. And like my parents were doing their best to still have me have a normal childhood. So they would take me to a movie, or they would do some other activity with me. And Patti was with me. And I always felt it always gave a tinge, or whatever that word might be, to the happiness I was feeling at being with my parents. Is I sure wish Patti was here. And so what can I do to make Patti be here with me? And I remember that feeling often when I'd be at a baseball game with my parents, and Patti would be sitting right next to me. That's the only way I could deal with her not being there, was to imagine that she was there with me. I guess if that's probably the best way to describe that. And that's been true for the rest of my life. Even now, Patti's with me when something happens. So she's there.
I think that's really beautiful. And I feel that way too. I connect very deeply with you on this, Dan. And I think a lot of people listening will connect with that or might be on that journey of how do I keep connecting with my sibling even after they've passed, especially if it's a recent loss for them. But
Yeah.
it does become a thing where like you want to carry them with you. But that's not something that necessarily happens right away. Sometimes it's something that you evolve with as you're going through your grief journey. But again, you were so young when this happened. So it was like an evolution for you. So tell us a little bit about how like this because you go into adulthood and stuff. How did this change or evolve in that way for you? Because or how did this loss shape your life?
So it wasn't just the loss of Patti. I think I had repressed a lot of feelings at the age of 13. I was trying to still be whatever a normal teenager is. And I remember school being so comforting to me because it was where normal life was happening. My home life had been thrown up into this turmoil, and that was made worse, Maya, unfortunately, when my father passed away 2 years after Patti passed away.
Wow.
And his death was sudden. It was a heart attack, and it happened when he was at work. And so all the feelings I had repressed about Patti came flooding back, because now there was this new loss. At the age of 15, I had just lost my father. And so Patti was, my feelings about Patti were all still in there, obviously. And so those feelings came flooding back. And my mother, who had been strong during this time frame, had now suddenly lost a daughter and a husband in the span of 2 years. She fell apart, Maya. She really just was not able to be a good parent to me or to my baby sister, Cindy. And so my older brother and older sister, rightfully so, actually strongly suggested, that they take us out of that house, that they get some help from mom, institutionalize her, or whatever they needed to do back in the late 70s, and have Cindy and I lived with one of them. And Cindy did that. Rightfully, she was still a baby. But I refused to go. I refused to leave my mom.
Because Cindy would have
She was all I
been,
had
what,
left.
13 at the time, right? 13, you're 15? You're 2 years apart? Is that right?
Well, no, that was Patti. My baby sister Cindy was still an infant. She had just been
Oh,
born.
that's right. She was very young. That's right.
She would have been 4 years old at that point.
Right. So who did she go to live with,
She
Dan?
went to live with my older sister
So
Libby.
your older sister actually took her in.
Older sister Libby took my
Wow.
baby sister Cindy in, and she would have taken me in too, but I refused to leave my
You
mother
wanted to stay with mom. You wanted to
because
stay.
she's all I had left, I felt. And my older brother and older sister were such loving older siblings to me during that time and have continued to be. My older brother, that could be another podcast to talk about how he stepped in and became a father figure to me and then eventually a mother figure to me.
Wow.
And I really was blessed, Maya, with incredible siblings and still am. But at that point, I continued to live with my really emotionally ill mother.
Right.
And that, in hindsight, probably was a mistake. I couldn't have done it any other way, but she was not fit to parent me.
Right.
And she had just lost a daughter and a husband, and she needed help herself. And she didn't need to be parenting this teenage kid. But I wouldn't leave her. I would not leave her. And then eventually things got a little bit better. My baby sister Cindy did come back to live with my mother and me, and we moved to a much smaller house.
Wow.
And
Okay.
so now we're leaving this big empty house and moving into a smaller house.
Mhm.
And so I did go away to college. And I just recently found some letters I had written to my mother during that time, asking her how the parenting was going. So there were still concerns about her ability to raise my little
So
sister.
here you are out of college and you're like, just checking in. Oh, how's
How are
mom
you?
life
Yeah,
going?
how are you
And how's
doing?
my girl Cindy
How
doing?
are you
You're like
doing?
checking
Right,
in. How
exactly. Yeah,
fascinating.
yeah.
Wow. Let me ask you this just to back up for a second. So how many years did Cindy live out of the house before she came back?
Probably a couple. And things started to get a little bit better
Sure.
with our mom, and so we thought that she could spend. I don't think she was back with us full time. I think Libby was still very much involved in her parenting.
Your older
Uh,
sister.
my
Yeah.
older sister Libby was still involved with that, but it was good enough that I think I felt I could go away to college, and so I did. I went to a college in a different state, but then
You were still checking in with those letters though.
checking
Yeah.
in with them, and then my mother developed a pain in her back at some point, and it turned out to be cancer.
Mm.
And so during my junior year in college, she passed away from cancer. And so I moved back to Knoxville and helped Libby raise my baby sister, Cindy. So we together, because again, my older brother, Buster, I can't say enough about him and how much he stepped in and so forth. But he was older and married and was not even living in Knoxville at that point. And so Libby and I raised our baby sister, Cindy, for a number of years while I finished up my college work at UT in Knoxville.
Good for you.
Mhm.
That's amazing. Let
Yeah.
me ask you this to go back a little bit. And yeah, I'm sure your brother Buster was awesome, but he had his own family and stuff. So he was probably just super supportive of you and Libby, but was like, I'm here for you guys, but I've got my family too. So it was a balancing act. And I totally get that. But let me ask you this. So to go back to your dad, it's interesting to me that your dad passed 2 years. And you mentioned something earlier in this episode about how he had said, I should have said this to the doctor. I should have said that. I would almost venture to say there was probably a broken heart syndrome a little bit in your father as well. That's what that story strikes me a little bit. Have you ever explored, you're smiling, so I think you've explored that too.
Absolutely, Maya. He died of a broken heart.
Yeah. I dialed into that. I was like, we need to tap into this for just a moment because, yeah, there was a lot of guilt there. And I want you to touch on that because you experienced it. I'm just listening and you guys are listening, but you said so many key points that I've heard from other people that have shared stories like that. And he was really beating himself up from what you shared. I should have said this. I should have said this. Shoulda. And I think it's a good story or part of the story to share because we have to forgive ourselves for these things. But I think that play. So you feel like he did die of a broken heart too?
It absolutely was a factor. I
Yeah.
can also tell you that he had high blood pressure and he smoked.
So it was a perfect storm
It was a
with
perfect
everything.
storm,
Mhm.
but I know that he never got over Patty's. He not only did he not get over her death, but he also never got over not questioning the doctors.
Right.
Just simply going up to one of them and saying, "Could it possibly be an appendicitis?" And he kicked himself for that until he passed away. And so, yes, broken heart definitely was a factor in that for sure. And then my mother's heart was broken too, obviously, from losing a child and a husband. And she was already emotionally fragile. I didn't know this about her because she had this way of being strong during the emergency, if you will, but then she would fall apart afterwards. And during my senior year in high school, she tried to kill herself. My mother
Wow.
did. And now this is before I go away to college. Things did get better again after that, but there was a
Mhm.
moment in there when it was just my mother and I living together when I refused to stay home with her one night and she tried to kill herself. So that was the shape that my mother was in during all this time too.
She had a broken heart as well. It was just it was manifesting in different ways. Your father felt guilt because he's the leader, he's the provider, he's all of that in the family, and
Right.
I should have identified this.
Right.
But that was his journey where he needed to forgive himself, and like we're human, right? We have to
Right.
forgive ourselves. So when we put our trust in doctors, and there's a lot to unpack there. But then to go to your mom, of course she had a broken heart as well. These are, as we know, like losing a child, oh my gosh, it's so heavy and so difficult. But thank you for sharing that with us. You went through a lot. You went through a lot at very young ages. Did you find your mother? Is that how you knew that she made an attempt, or what was that like?
So the reason why I had refused to stay home with her that evening, she was
Yeah.
feeling particularly lonely and just wanted company. But I had a date, Maya.
You're a high school guy. Come
I'm a high
on. You
school
want to
guy.
go
I
and
had
have
a date.
fun.
I wasn't going to
Yeah.
break my date. So I said, no, I'm not, I've got this date. I'll see you when I get home. And so I got home 11-ish or so. And one of our neighbors was at the front door of my house. And so I knew something was up. And he said, Danny, I went by Danny in those high school days. Danny, I need to let you know your mother has taken some sleeping pills and the ambulance is on the way. And it was a failed attempt. Thankfully, it wasn't successful, but she certainly was crying out for attention at that point with the overdose of sleeping pills. But still, I would refuse to leave her. She was all I had, Maya. I'd lost my dad, my sister, and a little younger sister, and baby sister Cindy was now living with Libby, and Buster was married. And now it was just my mom and I there for a
Right.
couple of years, and I wasn't going to let her go too.
Look, I think you made the right decision, right? And I think that you can sit here and talk about this very it's a very interesting story about your family and how it's evolved, and it's definitely a story of family dynamics, but she clearly needed you. And so we can look back and we can say, should we have done this? Should we have done that? But Dan, I think you made the right decision. She needed you. She did.
I needed her too. I needed her too. And something else I've heard some of your guests talk about is how your position in the family shifts when a sibling passes away.
Yep.
And that I certainly felt that too through those years because I was a middle child when there were seven of us. And then Patty passes away, and I'm an only child in some ways at that point, or an oldest child to my baby sister Cindy. So I can never quite figure out exactly where my position was in the family. And then when both Libby and Buster had moved out of the house, and Cindy had gone away to be with Libby, I truly was an only child with one parent.
You were.
I was an only
Totally.
child with my mother, and so that big full house of seven was suddenly such a quiet, empty house, and that's just something that has stayed with me all of my life. I'm not comfortable in empty houses. I have to have something going on.
Yeah. So this is coming up again, right? From what you shared about the initial loss. And then, yeah. And I love that you're sharing this because you're right. It is something that has come up in other episodes. And I like when we talk about this because here's the thing, it's not that when we lose a sibling, it's not that sibling never existed, but right, like you're always going to be one of five, right? It's like that's never going to change. But we're the ones here having a human experience in life. And so family dynamics change. And that's exactly what happened to you. And I'm so glad that you highlighted that you were an only child in that house. Like, you're not an only child, you have siblings, but you were playing the role of an only child. You were playing the role of an elder sibling to your sister. So this is very real. Like, two things can be true, right, at the same time. And I think that's something that can really leave a lot of us, especially when we're early in the grief journey, Dan, confused, because we're like, but I'm the middle child. Like, why am I feeling like I'm an only child? Or why am I feeling like I'm the eldest child? Because I'm playing that role right now, not because, I wanted to, or not because, but because that's who I need to be right now for the family.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. And I felt all of those feels that you're describing. And so it was a little bit confusing during that time frame. I wish therapy existed in those days. I'm sure therapy did exist in those days, but it didn't exist for me. In hindsight, I wish I had received some therapy, but I didn't go through any therapy until almost 30 years after Patti passed away. And it was for a different reason, Maya. It was because I was going through a divorce.
Mhm.
And divorce is tough for anybody in any situation. But for me, for some reason, it was an end of the world feeling for me. So why was I taking this divorce so horribly in difficult ways? And so I went to therapy, and the therapist was able to help me understand that Patti had passed away when she was 10 years old. My daughter at the time of this divorce was 10 years old. And so I was reliving the death of Patti by the thought of my daughter not being with me all the time. I had a son too. I still had a daughter and a son, but that was, and it was also another destruction of a family. My family had collapsed in on itself in some ways in my teenage and early 20s, and then now this new family of mine of four was collapsing again, falling apart. So I was reliving the deaths that had happened in my family, especially Patti's death, and so many feelings that I should have processed right after Patti passed away, I was now processing 30 years later during this divorce, during the divorce therapy. And it was so helpful. I get therapy early and often. And I wish I had done it far sooner than I did.
I'm absolutely blown away by this. And thank you for sharing. When we were chatting before we started the episode, of course, we were talking about the importance of therapy, and we know a common therapist in our connection, and that's how Dan found us, which is amazing. Our dear friend Dawn. But this is so amazing. Thank you for sharing that, Dan, because I was curious what you were going to share and how this came up, but what a revelation that you were like, okay, I'm going through a divorce. I'm going through a difficult time. I need some help, which, look, let's be honest, not a lot of guys have the insight, right? To say, it's just true. Men tend to be a little more opposed to therapy. So I'm super proud of you for just being so open and going. But then the knowledge, I feel like times have changed too with that, but like it used to be a thing. And then it can be a cultural thing. There's a lot of other things that could be, again, another episode we could do talking about that. But I'm proud of you for going. But like, I'm blown away by the insight that you got. You must have had a great therapist, because to understand that Patti passed at that age and then your daughter was the same age, and oh my God, this is why I'm feeling so much about this. And oh my God, it's because we are dissolving the family in, a lot of people say divorce feels like a death. I've been divorced, so I do understand. It's not the same thing, but it brought up so much for me.
Right.
I went through my divorce in 2023, and so I connect so much with you on this, because I understand why people say divorce is like a death. It's not the same, but it does bring up so many death things. It brought up a lot for me. It did for me too. But
Right.
for you, there's a depth and a level here with your daughter being the same age as your sister who you were closest with, and that was like your ride or die growing up with. A
Exactly.
lot of things there, and you're dissolving, and then her death dissolved your family unit. Deaths were what happened instead, but a divorce can feel like a death. So for me, it's clicking for me as you're saying this.
Sure.
How far, I'm just so curious, how far into your therapy journey did you start to realize this, or did you feel like your therapist was able to give you this moment of clarity? Because that's huge. I wouldn't have thought to connect those things.
It was after several sessions. The
Sure.
therapist took my family history, and so I basically told him the story that I've told you of the deaths in my family and the ages. He wanted to know the ages of when people passed away, how old I was and how old they were. And then he asked me about my current family, and I remember saying, I've got a 3-year-old son and a 10-year-old daughter. And I could see his eyes go like, you need to know something. And he stopped. He said, do you understand that Patti was 10 years old and your daughter is 10 years old? And the tears just started flowing. And so he immediately, as soon as I said the age of my daughter, and this was several sessions in, he said, this is why this is end of the world for you. This is death. This is your sister's dying again. And so he helped me get through all those feelings again. And but it also reminded me how special Patti was and how full of life she was, and she had so many friends, and she was just a joy to so many people. So it was good to have those good feelings come back too. But boy, I had repressed so much about her, and maybe because of the death of my parents in the interim, I had to repress those feelings even more because I was dealing with other deaths too. But Patti, more than dad and mom, to be honest with you, those were the feelings that came rushing back to me when I was going through my divorce. And thank goodness I did have therapy. It's changed my adult life, and I have continued to go to therapy all my adult life.
I'm proud of you, Dan. That's amazing. Yeah, I don't know what I do without therapy too, so I'm with you. It's
Right.
life-changing. It really is.
Yeah.
Especially when you've got a great therapist like your therapist that can give you insight. That's what it's all about too, right? Someone giving you this insight and can connect the dots for you, and you're like, "Oh, so
Yeah.
I'm not crazy for feeling this or feeling that." Like, they give you, in addition to making you feel like you're not totally losing it, they give you answers. They give you that kind of mirror back and going, "This is why you're feeling," and it's invaluable in my opinion from what I've experienced too. I think that's great, but yeah, that's very deep, like what you were going through. So uh, your story is really about secondary losses too, Dan, like a lot of with your divorce and going through that moment. And so, where are you now after that? And you've lost another sibling, which we're going to talk about in a moment. But going through that experience, how do you feel like you come out on the other side? And do you feel like, actually, I want to dial into this too. You were saying that because you lost your mom and you lost your dad immediately after, pretty much 2 years is pretty fast, and then you lost your mom, like you didn't feel like maybe you got to grieve Patti 100%. So I think there was that healing that happened. And so
Right.
after you went through that, a lot of people that are listening to this that have lost more than one sibling or have lost more than one person, because that's very real, like your story, it's hard because it's compounding the grief that happens at that point, like what you went through. But now that you were able to go through your divorce and go through the grieving and bringing up anything maybe you hadn't processed, what was life for you like after that? And then we'll get into Libby as well.
Yeah, I do want to talk about Libby. But before Libby, I should mention that someone came back into my life. I had been divorced for a while, and I was floundering in relationships. I was trying to raise two children as a single dad too, half the time. My ex-wife and I shared custody, so every other week that my children were with me. So that was what my main focus was, them during those time frames. But as far as a dating life, I was floundering. When Patti and I were children, I think I mentioned we had our separate set of friends, and we had mutual friends. And there was one other family in our neighborhood who we were all particularly close to. And Patty's best friend was this little girl named Murph. It's a funny nickname, Murph. And they were best buddies. And when Patti passed away, Murph stopped coming around the house too. And her family was grieving too over the death. And so our families, just because we didn't know what to say to each other, kind of grew distant. But Murph and I went to high school together and ran in the same circles and all. And we stayed in touch over the years. Our family stayed in touch, but it wasn't the same after Patti passed away, really. But I'll make a long story short because it's for another podcast. But Murph and I are now married, and she has saved my life.
And how long
It's
have you guys
not an
been married?
exaggeration to say that her coming back into my life in this big way
Yeah.
has saved my life. And we celebrate Patti. We talk about her. We cry about her. Patti was Murph's best friend, and so and we're married now, and it's just the most beautiful thing for me. My second marriage has been such a blessing, and Murph has saved my life, and so that really she is to receive credit for a lot of my healing over the years, in addition to the therapist. And so yeah, and so we've been married now for about 18 years. Murph.
Congratulations. That's
Yeah,
awesome.
yeah.
This is such an important part of your story. That's why I wanted you to share this with us. He gave me a little teaser before we got on. I was like, oh my God, I can't wait to share this with you guys because how special that your sibling that you were clustered with in your family, like her best friend, Murph, shout out, we love you. How special. That's really special. How did you guys reconnect? We got to know. We can't leave people on the edge of their seat. How did you guys reconnect? This is wild.
So the way that we stayed connected, mainly Christmas cards. I would
Okay.
send her family a Christmas card. She would send my family a Christmas
All
card.
these years after your sister passed?
Oh yeah, it was a Christmas
Wow.
card every year, and then I went to see her one year when we were both married to other people. And for me, Murph had always been my little sister's bratty friend. I couldn't see the beauty in her in those days. She was just another bratty kid in the neighborhood who was my sister's friend. And nor could I really see it in high school. But when I saw her that time as an adult, married with children of her own, she was beautiful, Maya. She is beautiful, not just physically beautiful, but beautiful in all the other ways too. But we were married to other people, but something must have registered at that point. But so a few years after that, she sent me a Christmas card, and we jokingly differ on what the Christmas card said. But I
Mhm.
have always interpreted her Christmas card as an invitation,
Oh,
and so I accepted that invitation. She knew I had been divorced for a couple of years. She had recently divorced, and on New Year's Eve of that year, we met in Knoxville, back in our hometowns, and that was our first date. And this was 18 years ago, and we've been together ever since.
I knew you were gonna say that. I love it. That's so sweet. I love it.
Yeah,
I love it. And I'm sure she, like you mentioned earlier, it's I don't know. I think your sister's with you on that one, but that's a whole other
she is. We laugh all the time about what Patti must think of this
Yeah.
marriage we have, but it's been a blessing. My children love
That's
Murph,
awesome.
and
Let's talk about Libby. So Libby's your amazing older sister who was out of the house when this happened, but was raising Cindy. And so take us to 2010 when you lost Libby. I'm sure that brought up a whole lot for you, but talk to us about that.
it did. And certainly, I handled those final days with her better than I had handled that last moment with Patti, and
Of
then that's
course.
always been a blessing too. But I got to take you back to Libby's birth, though, even before I was born. She was a miracle child. The doctors had told our parents that she probably wouldn't live through her childhood because she had a severe spinal problem. And they said if she did live, that she'd never be able to walk just because the spine was too curved or whatever, too broken. So she proved the doctors wrong. Not only did she live a long life, but she actually was a cheerleader and a gymnast as a young adult. So she proved the doctors wrong on that one. And she was our miracle child. And she also was a smoker. And my older brother, who's still alive, and I, and my baby sister, Cindy, we really do, in some ways, chalk up smoking to a lot of our family problems, deaths, but with other factors. But and so she started to have health problems in her 40s, and there came a point where we really thought she was going to die. I can remember being in a hospital one night with her husband in Knoxville, and we were actually trying to make the decision whether we would remove all the lines from her and so forth. And ultimately it was her husband's decision to make. And so he decided, yeah, let's pull the lines. And she made this miraculous turnaround again, Maya. And so she ended up living for another 3 or 4 years after that
Get out of
until she
here.
passed away. So she was
Wow.
this miracle child. And she was the one person on this planet who loved me unconditionally. I think even my other brother and other people in my life, even Murph, there's probably something I could do that would break that love pact, but not with Libby. I could have done anything and she would still love me. And that's how she was with everybody. That's how she had been with my baby sister, Cindy. And she just loved people. And she wasn't able to have children of her own. Again, I think because of that spinal issue she had. So everybody else in the world became her child. And she did her best to try to raise me. She did a great job with our baby sister, Cindy. And so we were close, but more so from an older sister kind of standpoint. She was 7 years older than I am. And but I wish everybody on this planet could love the way that she loved. She loved fiercely. She and wouldn't take no for an answer when she loved you. You were going to love her back, and that describes Libby, I think, as best I can. She just loved people unconditionally, and we think she waited until we were all in Knoxville to pass away. I've heard of people doing that. We had all actually gone to Knoxville for Thanksgiving in 2010 because Murph's father had just passed away. And again, this was our families were friends, so we all knew Murph's father. So
Right.
we had all gone to Knoxville for Thanksgiving to support Murph's family in his death. And then Libby suddenly is hospitalized again while we're all down there. And she passed away on Thanksgiving Day after we'd all had a chance. My older brother, my baby sister, and I, and Murph, we'd all had a chance to say goodbye to her. And then she passed away. I really think she waited for that.
She was like I think it's interesting. Thank you for sharing her with us too. It's important that we talk about all your siblings that, especially on here, talk about your siblings who are no longer. And it's, she didn't have children biologically, but she took care of Cindy.
Yeah.
That was her baby. She took care of you. And as the mama matriarch, doesn't surprise me that she was holding on so you guys could all. But I love her story too. I think that's really special. You have some really special siblings.
I do. And they were a blessing. And I know that not all families have what I had. And so I do count my blessings in that regard. Yes, therapy has helped throughout the years, but I would not have made it without my older brother Buster, and Libby, and baby sister Cindy too. The three of us who are now still alive, we don't live physically close. My brother's in Indiana, my sister's in Knoxville, and I'm in Maryland now, but we are emotionally as tight as any siblings could possibly be. And I know it's because those losses have brought us together so
That's
tight.
that's not always the case, Dan.
I
It's
know.
not always the case, like we were talking about earlier. So I think even though it did create these losses like your father, you think there's some things there also with your mother. I think it's a beautiful testament to each one of you that you have been able to be close and have a good relationship, because that's not everybody's story. As from listening to the show, as you guys know from listening to the show, that's not everybody's story, and it's wonderful that you appreciate that and you hold that close to your heart.
Right.
Dan, is there anything I didn't ask you today that you want to share with our incredible audience? Feel free to share.
Just one more thing about Libby, if I could,
Of course.
because we all learned a very valuable lesson from her, which I think the world could learn. She actually drove us crazy with this when she was alive, but she was so right. She would never end a conversation with one of us, either on the phone or in person, without saying, "I love you." And I remember that horrible thing I said to Patti way back when, "You're just doing this for our parents' attention," when I could have just said, "I love you." And Libby, it would drive us crazy with this, but we never talked with her on the phone or otherwise without her saying, "I love you." And so the night before she died, I did hug her and say, "I love you." And we need to love each other. We need to overcome whatever is going on and just find a way to love each other. It helps you so much with the rest of your life to know that you said that and that you felt that from your siblings. So don't hesitate to tell people you love them. Don't wait. Don't wait.
I love that, Dan.
Yeah.
And what a kind of 360 healing moment for you that you were able to say that to Libby when you weren't able to say that.
Yeah, exactly.
So I hear the emotion behind that because of course you're in a place now where I wish I would have done that, but I didn't. And it makes you emotional, but you got to, it's a moment where you get to do that for someone else. And you were able to do that for Libby. I'm sure that was a really healing moment and bring it all
It
together.
so was, and it's been such a comfort to me in the last 15 years that Libby's been gone. Yeah, that's it's been a comfort, sure. And if people want to be in touch with me, I'm happy to share my email address. But I'm in Facebook, I'm in Instagram. Those are the only two. People in their 60s aren't too many other places, but yeah, Facebook and Instagram for me. May I share my email address? Is
Yep,
that okay?
we're gonna put it in the show notes. So let them know what your email is. Yep.
Okay, so it's D.F. Dunsmore at Comcast.net.
Perfect. And we'll put it in the show notes as well because, especially our listeners who have lost more than one sibling or lost more than one family member, they're going to connect with your story. If they've lost a sibling in the same way as you, Dan, they're going to connect with that. And then also folks that have been on this journey for a couple of decades or they're going to connect with you too. So, Dan, thank you so much for being here today. And thank you for sharing not only Patty's story, but also Libby's story and your family's story. We really appreciate you being here.
Maya, thank you for the chance. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for listening to the Surviving Siblings podcast. If you enjoyed this episode as much as I did creating it for you, then share it on your chosen social media platform. And don't forget to tag us at Surviving Siblings Podcast so that more surviving siblings can find us. Remember to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast. And don't forget to follow us on all social media platforms. We're on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok at Surviving Siblings Podcast. All links can be found in the show notes, so be sure to check those out too. Thank you again for the support. Until the next episode, keep on surviving, my surviving siblings.